Hello, it's Aston back with another macroeconomic video. And today we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is national savings. So let's recall from the beginning about a closed economy. The formula for the total GDP is Y is equal to C plus I plus G, not X minus M, not NX, because it's closed, it doesn't trade with the outside world, basically. So if that's the case, can we say that investment is equal to Y minus C minus G? Because if changing the subject, you'll plop C and G to the other side, and you should get investment. Now, let's say, actually, we know that Y is the total output of the economy, and C and G are both consumption. So wouldn't you say that C plus G is equal to total consumption in the economy or total expenditure in the economy? Doesn't that mean that total output minus expenditure gives you the remaining amount of output or the leftover amount of output? Which is why we say Y minus C minus G is just the national savings. That means that investment is equal to national savings. Pretty good logic. Since everything adds up mathematically, it makes sense. But last video, we spoke about exogenous. Y, C, and G are exogenous, while I is the only one that's endogenous, explained by the rate of interest. Can we say that since all of these three are exogenous, that means that endogenous I is equal to exogenous S? And I might be wondering, what's with this long-ass formula, Aston, that I'm seeing over there? And I'll explain it to you right now. So S is equal to I. That's why, as you can see, there's two equal signs. And I simply split them up into private and public saving. So private savings is just Y minus T minus C. Total output minus the taxes minus consumption or private consumption. That's just going to be your private saving because it's how much you produce in the economy minus how much private or consumers consume in the economy, and that's going to give you your private saving. While over here, it's taxes minus the government spending, which means taxes are essentially how much the government makes, so government revenue minus government expenditure, and that gives you the government savings or the public savings. And if you add up public savings, private savings, you'll get national savings or total savings in the economy. Now, here's the thing. Since we know that the savings is exogenous, that means it's fixed, that means it's predetermined, we can say that the supply, or S, is equal throughout. It's completely vertical. It's perfectly inelastic. That's what it means. And since we're on the topic of supply and demand, and I called saving supply, he might be wondering, oh, did he just maybe slip his tongue? No, that's on purpose. Since last video we spoke about how investment is negatively correlated with the rate of interest, and we call it demand, we can say that the savings is the supply. Supply for what though? Supply for loanable funds, while investment is the demand for loanable funds, because it's, of course, from firms and people, how willing they are to borrow, while the savings is the supply because it's how willing are banks and lenders willing to lend to you. But since we know that savings is fixed, that means that the intersection of investment and savings is going to determine the rate of interest, since S is equal to I, equilibrium. Now let's talk about crowding out. So usually crowding out only occurs when the economy is at full potential, because as you can see on this PPC, public goods, private goods. If you are directly in the middle and you want to produce more public goods, you'll have to give out less resources to private goods. Hence, you're crowding out. But this can also occur in financial markets. And here's how. Right here. Okay, this might look confusing because the savings curve is moving and it's fixed, but here's the real reason. So, I is endogenous. And let's say that you are reducing the tax rate. Okay, if you reduce the tax rate, here's what's going to happen. Your public savings will fall because the government is making less money, while your private savings will rise. Hold up. why is my private savings rising when the taxes are falling? Doesn't it make sense for me to spend more of my income? Here's a cool thing. So it's as we know from the last video, it's autonomous C plus MPC into your disposable income. Yes, you have more disposable income, but because of the MPC, you don't spend all of it. You save more than you'll spend, which will mean that your private saving, even though there's a fall in taxes, even though your disposable income is higher, you're still going to consume more, but you're going to save more than that. You're going to save more than you consume, which means that your private savings will rise while your public savings will fall. Okay, but now what's the impact on the savings? That's going to fall because, yes, while you do save more than you spend, your private savings increase is less than your public savings decrease, which will cause a total decrease in savings, hence it'll shift to the left. And in the same way, we can talk about government spending. Now, if government spending rises because it's T minus G, an increase in this will obviously cause a fall in public saving, and then that'll cause a fall in national savings, which is why it's still shifting to the left. So a fiscal policy will cause a fall in savings. Here's where we get to the goods market and the loanable funds market. So now, when you increase government spending, what happens is consumption will rise in both governments and, of course, in private consumers, which will cause an excess demand in the goods market. But in the loanable funds market, since your savings is falling, there's less demand. I mean, there's still demand, but people want to borrow, but they can't because of the interest rate, which will cause an excess demand in the loanable funds market. Now let's take the vice versa. Let's say that government spending falls. Same exact idea. That means that public savings will rise, national savings rise, boom, shifts to the right, which will cause an excess supply in the loanable funds market, an excess supply in the goods market because the government spending less. And now, what about taxes? A rise in taxes will cause a fall in private saving and a rise in public savings. Now, the reason why there's a fall in private savings is because you still need to spend a lot more money, right? Which means that you make less, you have less disposable income, but you're still spending a good chunk of that money, which means that your private savings will fall, while public savings will rise more than that. So that means that total savings will increase in the economy. Booyakasha. That's it, as you can see from this awesome curve I drew. Now we talked about investment being the demand. What happens when investment rises? Okay, cool. So we know that the savings is the supply for loanable funds. And because the supply for loanable funds is exogenous, not endogenous, it doesn't really change compared to when investment changes, which means that it's perfectly inelastic, like I said. Now, if you've taken economics, treat it like a supply and demand curve, because even though the demand does increase, supply physically can't increase to adapt to demand, which means that quantity of investment, the quantity of saving is the same, just that the interest rate is higher. Thank you. This video took me 5 tries to record, and that's only because of this fucking tax bit for private savings. So annoying, oh my goodness. Took me some time, but I do this all for you guys. And also partly for myself too, because I'm trying to, become a better teacher and everything, and trying to pass my grades. So yeah, this topic is a little more confusing, especially that private savings bit and taxes can really trip people up. And now imagine they start talking about, oh, hey, equal rise in government spending, equal rise in taxes, rise in autonomous investment. This all gets confusing, which is why you need to practice. Okay, anyways, thank you. I'm gonna go to the grocery store now, super sleepy, and I have work today, man. Oh, I'm actually working at Valentines, so this is the exact same color I'm gonna be wearing anyways. Bye.